Okay. All right. How are you guys doing today? My internet is a little slow today, but that's not stopping anything. We're going to carry on. And if we need to do it again, we will, because this needs to be done. So I hope you guys are well today. Blood Moon Oracle is the channel, and my name is Leticia. Thank you for stopping by. We are going to do the last section of chapter 6. And this is like the ending of the last part. Let me see. The wisdom of the body. Or actually, I'm sorry. This is chapter 7. Yes. It's the beginning of chapter 7. That is a short, very short chapter 7. And yeah, it's a very short chapter 7. Because last week we did chapter 6. That's right. And we did the ending last week as well. And so we're going to go ahead and continue on. This week has been a very beautiful week. I'm going to go ahead and light my candle for our opening prayer or meditation. This week has been an interesting week, and it has been one where I have been able to see how I have in fact healed. When I tell you, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, the healing is real. And you know it is because you get to see yourself in action with things that would normally trigger you, with things that would normally cause you to respond a certain way and you don't. And in ways that you usually respond to deal with situations, you don't really enter that path any longer. That's how you know the healing is real. And this week has been a very interesting week where I've been able to observe myself. It is so interesting now that I'm aware of my triggers, now that I'm aware of things that would normally set me off and cause me to, like, read somebody for filth. I don't feel the necessity to do that. I really don't. I'm so unbothered. It's amazing. And it's almost like there's the understanding that to each his own. Like, that's the most beautiful thing that I've realized, is that we all are on our own path. And I don't necessarily have to be concerned about anybody else's except for mine. Sometimes I'm a little concerned with my children, more times than not, maybe more than I should be. However, the healing is real. That's all I'm going to say. And I have no complaints. Even if I did have one, I probably would not complain. It's just who I am. But I honestly have no complaints. I can say that today. And I'm so grateful and appreciative. And I'm so glad that I made some of the choices that I made over this past year. One was to kind of try something new and start again. I'm so glad I did that. That was like one of the best decisions I've ever made. And I'm very purposeful. Once you reach a certain age, like, you stop taking real simple things for granted because you realize the fragility of life and the fact that you woke up another day that you weren't promised. That changes your whole perspective around life. And you gain an appreciation that's like, it's real. It's real. And I tend to want to be a minimalist. Like, I'm very simple. I don't need a lot. I'm very easy to please. And I love the simple things in life, the sensual things in life, being able to slow down enough to see and enjoy life. We can have the most amazing life, but if we're always going nonstop, how are we actually enjoying what we have? And so being able to slow down and just breathe. What does it feel like to be in your body? To feel your heart beat through every inch of your body. If you get still enough, you can do that. It's just like simple things like that. It doesn't take a lot from me. It really doesn't. I'm very simple. Simplicity is life. And so this week brought me to that realization. And lately I've been doing a lot that I would not normally do. I've been giving myself permission to have fun, to experience joy. Y'all know I'm big on joy. And all of that comes about because of the healing that has been done. There was a time when I thought of a negative thing for every positive experience that I was having. It's like, I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop. Oh, this is too good to be true. Something's about to go wrong. You know, that type of mentality. I'm so glad that I don't anymore. I'm so glad that I can look at the positive side of everything. I get to decide whether or not I want to respond to something or how I want to respond. Or, I get to decide that. And that's a beautiful thing for me because it's all about understanding that every day is not promised. It's all about just being able to enjoy what we have. That's why we're doing this healing and reading this book, Ayan Levanzant's book, Spiritual Hygiene. That's what we're talking about. Being able to live the life that we've come here to live. What did you come here to experience? That's a beautiful question to start this reading. What have you come here to experience? Do you know? Are you aware? As you're experiencing it, do you take time to slow down and notice the beauty of your experience? The things that you've been afforded? That's what this is about. Spiritual hygiene, a practical path for clean living, inner authority, and divine freedom, right? That's what we're talking about. And so chapter 7 opens with a prayer or a meditation, however you want to see this sacred moment as we enter in to read. It's a sacred permission to feel that we're about to discover and read through this chapter 7. And so I lit my candle here, and we are going to go ahead and read this entry before we go into chapter 7. Beloved presence, holy source of all that is how she starts this meditation. I enter this moment with no answers, but with willingness. I stand not with certainty, but with a trembling yes to what is real. I lay down the armor of performance, the mask of composure, and the burden of being strong. I give myself permission to return to the sanctuary within, where all feelings are welcome and nothing sacred is denied. I give myself permission to feel. I give myself permission to feel what aches without offering an apology. I give myself permission to feel what has been buried without crushing or rushing it away. I give myself permission to feel what is rising, coming alive within me without controlling its shape. I give myself permission to allow the tears that never had a voice to become my baptism. I give myself permission to allow the rage that had no room to become my holy fire. I give myself permission to allow the rage that had no room to become my holy fire. I give myself permission to allow the numbness that silenced me to be lifted by grace. I give myself permission to allow every emotion I've ever exiled to find its way home to love. I no longer choose to shame what I feel, not one bit of it. I no longer choose to delay what is true. I no longer choose to confuse silence with healing. I allow this chapter to be my return to what is honest. I allow my emotions to become sacred messengers. I allow my soul to know the safety of full expression. I allow the truth of my feeling nature to become a river that carries me back to wholeness. I surrender the need to be strong. I reclaim my right to be real. Let me say that again. I reclaim my right to be real, not having to put on a facade or perform or pretend like I'm somebody other than who I am. I am. I celebrate my desire to be free, to be me, and all that has been placed within me to experience that with joy. Amen. Ashe, Ao. It is done. And so it is. I love this. This is on point because not only have I realized this point of healing that I'm able to experience right now, this is a moment where I feel like I have never been freer. When I say that, I mean that. That divine freedom on the title, that's real. And I think that is what a lot of us are craving. We're craving a place where we can be authentic, unapologetic for who we are and what we feel, where we can be honest about what we're feeling and maybe what it is that we want to experience, right? I'm there and I'm loving it here. And so we're going to start the chapter. This is chapter 7, cleansing the inner atmosphere, right? And I just want to reiterate, this is not about performance. It's not about dogma, religious dogma. This is not about, rules and regulations, restrictions. This is about experiencing life in the way that we were created to experience it. Right? That's what this is about. And I have to just reiterate, like, I'm in a space in life where I have never been freer. When I tell you that, I mean that. And part of that is because I've reached a place where I don't care. Right? I don't care what people think. I mean, I do have a responsibility to present myself. I am, in many ways, starting with my home. But even to those that would look up to me, I do have a level of responsibility. But even in that, there should be like a level of freedom to be yourself And the beautiful thing about showing up in this moment, even as we go into this chapter, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about getting free from all of the external expectations, that sometimes have been placed on us to have to show up a certain way or, perform a certain way. I'm done with that. I'm done with that. Once you taste freedom, you never want to go back. I'm sorry. Once you really taste freedom, you don't want to go back to being in bondage. And I'm speaking relationships, right? Been there, done that, got the t-shirt for it. Matter of fact, when I see crazy approaching me, I cross the street now. I don't play with it. I don't play with it. And neither do I want to play with it. When it comes to, allowing certain organizations to come in and dictate how I'm supposed to live and what decisions I'm supposed to make and how I'm supposed to, relegate my expenses and my funds. Like, no. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt for it. We're not doing that. You don't have to do that when you accept responsibility for yourself and your relationship with your higher power. You don't have to. And I choose not to. And I tell you, I have never felt freer. So this is all about chapter 7, cleansing the inner atmosphere. I hope you can also say that too. Or you will get to a place where you feel what that feels like. The voice of silencing is born from trauma, right? We get to that place from experiencing trauma. The voice of truth is born from the divine, and we're released from that place of trauma and that place of silence when we truly encounter the divine. And you may have many names for your relationship with your higher power, whatever you call that energy, right? Whatever you call your connection to your source, right? Truth is born from connection to that energy. So she starts chapter 7 talking about Malikica. And I think Malikica is her other daughter. We'll find out here. Malikica's healing is what she names this section of the chapter, cleansing the inner atmosphere. Malikica was a mother and a strong presence in everyone's lives, friends, families, even coworkers. Yet over the years, something started to close in on her. At church, she raised her hands in praise but felt nothing. During prayer, her mind wandered. She knew all the rituals, but they had become hollow. She didn't think she was angry, but she snapped at minor things the children did. She didn't feel sad, but she was alarmed when she realized that she hadn't cried in months, maybe years. Her chest felt tight at night, so she started baking the chicken and she would have fried it. What caught her attention was the awareness that she often could not find the words for what she was feeling. What Malikica was experiencing was emotional congestion and spiritual smog. Malikica reluctantly brought the matter to the floor at her monthly sister circle meeting. She was guided into a sacred grief ritual as a spiritual hygiene practice. A grief process is a series of actions designed to honor what has been lost. It could be a person, a version of yourself, a dream, or even time. The intention of the practice is to give yourself is to give your grief, a sacred place to be expressed and released. It took several attempts before Malikica was able to weep for the baby she had lost but never named. She screamed into a towel the words she had not said to her ex after he cheated and left. She wrote a letter to her younger self about being bullied, overweight, and responsible for her younger siblings. When it was complete, she burned the 30 pages. Then she took a spiritual bath, anointed herself with myrrh oil, and sat in silence for the first time in months. The next morning, she breathed differently because something in her chest had lifted. Nothing in her life had changed, but she had made space for life to move again. Her emotional waters had cleared. Her mental sky had opened. Divine communication returned, and Malikica was present in her body for the first time in many years. Emotional congestion is a sign that the energy of your emotional flow has been interrupted in its normal cycle. Emotions are the energy that move us. Emotional energy is meant to move, not settle. Every experience you encounter and every story you tell has an emotion or a feeling attached to it. When emotional energy does not move, the emotional body becomes congested like a clogged pipe. You will drip, irritability, seep, fatigue, and sometimes burst wide open, exploding in unexpected ways. Again, using a real life example, a real life situation. And, a lot of people may think, oh, here we go again, naming another trauma. The book is all about trauma. She's always talking about some difficulty. Well, she's real. Like, so many times we try to sweep things like under the rug instead of dealing with it face forward. And I, for one, have experienced a family that did that. We sweep things under the rug, and not that we hope it's going to go away. Somehow there is the avoidance of it because it's too painful to deal with. We don't know how, but nevertheless, it doesn't disappear. It remains there. And we're talking about right now how it turns into like spiritual smog. We end up just going through the routine, lifeless, sometimes mindless. We end up being really snappy, short-tempered, without patience. It's because there's something that's not being dealt with that is causing some kind of congestion, emotional congestion. And when I tell you that is so true, for those of you that have heard my story, you can look back through some of my videos, and I tell it often about the experience of my awakening and how I sat on the floor and just, oh my gosh, it was like years of overflow, years of pain. It was such a painful, such an excruciating experience when I finally released control, when I finally said, okay, I give up, I surrender. And I sat on that floor and I must have boo-hooed, and it felt like it was gnashing of teeth. And it was just such a chaotic experience rising from the inside of me as I released control and allowed myself to just release everything. And it was painful, but at the same time, so liberating. I needed to do that. I needed to. Just like here, she's naming, all of these things in the background that has weighed heavy on Malikica's heart that she never made room to grieve, right? Grief comes through many different forms. It's not just about when somebody passes. Grief happens or needs to happen when change happens or when some type of trauma takes place. It's wise and it's healthy to allow place to grieve that thing, no matter what it is, whether it was intentional, whether it was your fault, whether it was something that just happened. Like, it's necessary to provide a sacred space to grieve it for our sake, for our benefit. So many times I'm just talking to people, just everyday people, and they'll say something and spirit will begin talking to me like, that's grief, unprocessed. You can't break out and say, oh, you need to grieve, because they wouldn't understand where you're coming from. But so many times during my normal day, when I'm just having general, casual conversation, this is the type of stuff that's happening on the inside. I'm having two conversations. I'm engaged in the outward conversation, but I'm also having an internal conversation with myself about what's happening spiritually, energetically. It's crazy. But we have to understand the importance of being attentive to what has happened and what is happening as a result of what has happened. Have we given ourselves permission to feel? Or are we running on empty, right? Are we operating on autopilot? Like she was saying here, like she got to the point where she would go to church, but she wasn't present. Like her mind was somewhere else. She was going through the rituals and the routines, but she wasn't engaged in it. She would be fixing dinner, intending to fry it, but she wasn't present. So she ended up baking it. Like something was off. And it was because of this emotional congestion. There's an interruption to the natural energy flow when it comes to emotions. That's how important grieving is. That's how important our emotional body is. And so, yeah, it's important to talk about these things. And you may feel like it's too much. It's like, well, that's all we talk about over and over and over because that's all we avoid. We all avoid it. We have. And we can speak to ourselves as a nation. You can take this, personally, or we can look at this collectively. We are in pain. Our country is one big pain body. We call it a melting pot, but it's a big pain body because there's so much that weighs on us that we've yet to deal with. We haven't even as a people, since we're talking about it, as a people, and I'm talking about people of color, those that were brought over and experienced, the tragedy of what we call the, I can't think of the name. Well, we're talking about slavery, just for lack of better words. We never got a chance to grieve. What happened? The fact that we were separated, many of us, from our home without any form of protection over here. It's kind of like what happens when kids are thrown into the foster system. We say they have advocates, but do they really? The foster system is really, I don't know. And I'm thankful for people that are, open their homes and welcome children in to a safe space, but that's not always the situation. It's kind of like that, taking someone from their home and placing them in a place of strangeness, putting them in a strange land without any advocacy. And I could go on and on about this. This is a conversation that I'm anticipating having really soon. I feel that coming and rising in my spirit. I need to have this conversation with someone. But when that time comes, I'll go deeper into it. But for now, that's what we're talking about. We never even really got a chance to grieve properly. There was no follow-up after the law was passed to abolish slavery. There was no counseling that was given. There was no reparations for what we lost. It was pretty much just, okay, go handle whatever you need to do to survive. There was no responsibility taken, right? That's why I say we live in a place in our country where it's just one big pain body. It is. And for those that would say, when will you get over that? Why you keep talking about, reparations, and why you keep bringing up slavery? That's why, because it's an unresolved wound. And that's what happens when something is left untended. It begins to rupture and disrupt other things that should be flowing. That's what we're talking about. And that's why she keeps bringing it up, because it's the message that's being reiterated. You cannot just ignore this. It has to be dealt with. However you choose to do that is up to you. But she's just giving the message that we have to deal with these things personally and collectively. We have to, or else it's going to bleed into other areas and disrupt. When silence became the symptom is the next part. Talia had always been the peace glue in her family. When arguments sparked, she changed the subject. When someone cried, she brought them a drink. When her uncle said something inappropriate at dinner, she laughed it off to break the tension. She had done it this way for years until one day, during a simple conversation about groceries, she burst into tears. She was not crying about food. She cried almost uncontrollably because her emotional body was full. Talia had gagged her truth. For so long, her body had become the battleground of unresolved pain. She realized her digestion was off after repeated bouts of heartburn. She knew that her shoulders ached. She told herself it was the result of wearing cheap bras. Her dreams were restless, and her waking hours seemed to last forever. Talia was spiritually constipated. She was backed up with words unsaid, tears postponed, truths denied, and feelings left to fester. She had been gagged, not by force, but by fear, by tradition, by trauma. The silence that once kept her safe had now become her sickness. She was filled with toxic spiritual smog. That's what it turns into. And I'm not even going to go there because I would open up a can of worms. But we have to be careful. We really do. Because sometimes we end up in situations, whether it's relationships or environments, that just feed that toxicity, and so we have to allow ourselves to feel. I always smile in my heart when I see somebody that's not ashamed to cry, that's not ashamed to express what's wrong and the fact that it bothered them. It's like, yes, that's okay. Don't apologize to me for feeling mad and upset or having a moment where you just had to let it out. Good for you. I'll never look down on you, right? For crashing out. Crash out by all means. Let that mess out. Don't hold that in. Who are you holding it in for? Who are you creating war within yourself for? Don't do it for me, and don't do it for anybody else. You better speak. You better let that mess out, even if you have to journal it or go into an empty field miles away and allow yourself to scream at the top of your lungs. Let that mess out. Don't hold that in, especially not for me. Not for me. So I always get a bit of joy when I see people that aren't afraid to let go and let loose. Yes, cry. We need to. We do. The next part says living with spiritual smog. As we explored in previous chapters, spiritual smog is the dense energetic residue that accumulates in your spiritual field when emotional disconnection settles in your daily rhythm. Spiritual smog accumulates when there is a prolonged absence of spiritual practice. In Talia's case, it was the result of spiritual avoidance, emotional misalignment, and unconscious energetic entanglements. Other common causes of spiritual smog can include long-term exposure to untruthful or low vibrational environments. Oof, that's a big one. Holding on to unforgiveness or outdated spiritual contracts. Absorbing collective trauma and ancestral debris. Saying one thing, living another. This is the definition of spiritual misalignment. Abandoning ritual, prayer, or emotional presence. And I know these may be like a little deep. So ask questions if this is confusing. Spirit got me on one of these this week. And we had a real heart to heart this week. And Spirit was like, yeah, this is going to come to an end. This is going to change quickly here because you need to get back in alignment. And so this is the type of situations that create spiritual smog, right? Long-term exposure that to untruthful or low vibrational environments. The key word is long-term, right? Because we don't live in a world of just high vibrational things and people, right? There's low vibrational spaces. And when we say low vibrational, that means things that low vibrational or untruthful things that, how can I explain that? Untruthful or low vibrational exposure to environments. And so an example of that would be say if you knew, I'm going to use the school system for an example, because that's one that would represent a level of dishonesty and untruth, right? We know there's a lot of things that we learn in school that doesn't align with truth. Now that we know better, right? And so long-term exposure to that can cause a bit of dissonance mentally, constantly being exposed to the untruths. There's something that will end up happening. And I feel like more than not, what will happen is there will be, like we just talked about, this internal war that will begin to fester within us. Because at one point, on a deep level, you know that what you're being taught is untrue. Now, for someone to sit under that and not say anything, that's where the rising of the internal conflict comes from. But if you're an advocate, maybe that might not be considered a situation that will tamper with your mentality, right? But to sit in that and to expose yourself to that without any type of resistance to that or rebuttal to the lies, right, can sometimes turn into conflictual energy building up within us. That would be a good example. What is something that conflicts with you mentally, spiritually, right? That's what we're talking about when we say untruthful or low vibrational environments. If you're somebody that is just, well, we all have a certain level of tolerance for drama and chaos, but just to be in an environment where there's always some drama, always some conflict, always some form of chaos that's happening, that would be considered low vibrational. Because sooner or later, it's going to cause some level of conflict within you, or maybe you'll get sucked into that, right? Holding on to unforgiveness, refusing to forgive people, or holding on to outdated spiritual contracts. Like, and that would mean, like, say if you were at one point in a committed or a relationship with someone that has gone by the wayside, and that person has gone on and has moved on, and you still hold on to them and wait for them to come back. And when they come back, it's like you make room, even though the connection has expired. It expired a long time ago, and you have needed to move on long time ago, right? Outdated contracts. That's devastating, right? That's very damaging. It can be. And if nothing else, what's going to happen is it's going to lead to a level of unforgiveness. You might end up being very vengeful. There's a lot of things that could arise out of that. Absorbing collective trauma or ancestral debris. This is kind of like that. The pain that's passed on, that's passed down, that we accept and receive as ours when maybe it's not, or maybe it's time to heal from it. Saying one thing, living another. This is the definition of spiritual misalignment, right? Being in alignment with what it is that you're saying. This is what Spirit is whooping me on this week. Spirit was whipping me real good too. So I got a whooping, y'all, this week. Spirit whipped me real good. And I'm going to be better, okay? Abandoning ritual, prayer, or emotional presence. This is the very core of our being. Talking about making time to stop. This is how I started the lesson today. Making time to stop and get still and connect with your divine source, whatever that is for you. Right? This is what can cause spiritual smog. Abandoning those things that you know is good for your spirit, right? Whatever that looks like. I'm not talking about anything particularly religious. I'm not talking about anything spiritual. What is your thing that connects you with your divine source? Right? For somebody, that could be as simple as just sitting still 10 minutes a day and not saying or doing anything, just being at one in the presence of your body, right? For somebody else, it could be going out into nature over a body of water and becoming one with everything around you. For someone else, it could be you could have committed to going and making yourself available to a service of some kind, right? What is your thing that you are called to? That's going to look different for everybody. And I always say my convictions are mine. Don't try to live by my convictions. You live by your convictions. Okay, what is that for you? Okay, everybody has to decide that for themselves. But these are to abandon that. These are things that cause spiritual smog, the confusion. Okay, the next part is the body as a bridge. The body holds the residue of what you feel, which is our emotions, what you believe in the mind, and what you carry energetically, spiritually. This is spirit. When spiritual smog gets thick and emotional congestion starts to settle, the body becomes the place of overflow, the final stop for all that has gone unprocessed. Spiritual smog clouds your connection to source, causes you to feel disoriented, uninspired, or spiritually numb. I'm going to say that again. Spiritual smog clouds your connection to source, whatever your source is, causes you to feel disoriented, uninspired, or spiritually numb. Every practice can be consecrated to the work of cleaning, aligning, or restoring the very issue that calls for healing. In this way, your practice becomes a living medicine tailored by spirit to meet the need before you. And so I'm glad she ended with that in this paragraph, because this is not about judgment. This is not about rules and regulations and dogma. This is about doing what is good for your mind, for your heart, for your spirit, for your soul. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about living medicine, tailored by spirit to meet the need, right? That's what these things are that we call spirit, that the things that will eliminate what we're talking about, that spiritual smog, right? And prevent the congestion from settling in our body. Okay. Every practice can be consecrated to the work of cleansing, aligning, or restoring. So either we're cleansing, we're aligning, or we're restoring, right? Cleansing means addressing something, acknowledging that we need to release, or, we need to get something out, get rid of something. Aligning means, something has gone to the wayside. We need to come back over here to where we're supposed to be, get back in alignment, right? Or restoring, right? It's bringing something back, restoring, right? Bringing it back. Aligning is like you're still there, but you're just kind of wobbling a little bit. Let's get it back together. Maybe restoring is the fact that something has just completely been abandoned and it needs to be brought back, right? But these are things that are good for our existence. It's good for our body, our mind, our heart, our spirits, our soul. These are things that are needed to live an enjoyable life. So there's some key distinctions between emotional congestion and spiritual smog. Emotional congestion is rooted in the heart and the nervous system. Spiritual smog is rooted in the aura. It's energy. It's energetic. Okay. Spiritual smog is energetic. Emotional congestion is rooted in the body. Emotional congestion comes from unexpressed or denied emotions. It comes from unexpressed or denied emotions, emotional congestion. Spiritual smog comes from spiritual misalignment or energetic pollution, right? It could be being in places where we know we shouldn't be too long, and sometimes it could be family. I'm sorry to say that, y'all. That hurts. But sometimes it's like, I'm going to go. When the holiday come around, you're like, I'm going to go, but I'm not going to stay there long. I'm just going to stay there for about 5 minutes and we leaving, right? We just going to show up and make an appearance and then we leaving, right? Spiritual smog comes from spiritual misalignment or energetic pollution. Okay. Emotional congestion feels like being emotionally blocked, heavy, or reactive. Spiritual smog feels like being spiritually disconnected, foggy, or stuck. Emotional congestion requires emotional expression and inner permission, when spiritual smog requires energetic cleansing and spiritual reattunement. Okay. Emotional congestion involves the body, the breath, and the feeling are our emotions. But spiritual smog involves ritual, intention, and re-sanctification. Okay. An example of emotional congestion would be holding grief and not allowing yourself to cry. It's like, I'm not finna cry about this. Mm-mm. Spiritual smog, an example, is praying while still holding resentment. It's almost like you're deluding yourself. Praying while still holding resentment or trying to manifest while out of alignment. Yeah, it's kind of like delusion. Just as the lungs and the blood must be purified for the body to thrive, the heart and the aura must both be cleansed for the soul to radiate clearly. One without the other will create a misfire, emotional weight in a spiritually disconnected vessel, or spiritual potential that cannot move through an emotionally congested heart. With spiritual hygiene, we cleanse the emotional waters and we clear the spiritual air so that divine life can flow without obstruction. And I know this feels like it's not tangible, but it is. It very much is. And a lot of this is it's simpler than we realize. It seems like it's a whole bunch of work, but a lot of it is really just being aware and allowing. It's really being aware and allowing yourself to go through processes, right? The next part says the weight of the unwept tears. The weight of unwept tears. Emotional congestion does not always begin with a crisis. It doesn't always have to do with trauma. More often, the congestion settles in with a quiet compromise. It is not always in the moment of heartbreak that we choke back tears. Quite commonly, the congestion forms the moment we tell ourselves, now's not the time. It's not that serious. I don't want to make things worse. It's in those sacred moments when truth wants to express. Whether it comes up as sobbing, silence, or sacred rage, but we force it back down. Something gets lodged in the body. The emotion becomes a phantom. It is felt, but not freed. The body always remembers what the mind tells the mouth it cannot and should not say. The nervous system then braces itself for the next moment of suppression. The heart builds an invisible wall of protection. Over time, that wall becomes filled with graffiti, a home for grief, shame, and unmet needs. And that's the weight of unwept tears when we don't allow ourselves to express. This is what happens. The next part says permission to feel, a sacred return to what is real. That's what the chapter 7 is about, giving ourselves permission to feel and the consequences when we don't. Carlos never told his best friend how hurt he was when he wasn't invited to the wedding. He said, "I totally understand," but a bitterness grew inside him like moss. He began not to return texts to his friends as quickly as he once did. When they went out drinking, he spoke less freely. The worst part of all was when he started questioning his own worth as a friend and within himself. Yes, it is true. Many men have a far more difficult time processing and expressing their feelings than women do. A man is far more likely to let his feelings roll off his back than his mother, sister, or the lady in his life. This not only creates major issues with intimacy and communication, but it also causes spiritual smog and emotional congestion that can lead to extremely bad behavior. In many cases, it is not the wound that hurts him, those around him, or those he loves. It's the silence that calcifies around it that causes the most significant problems. Unspoken pain nests, it festers, it rewrites the way we trust, love, and show up. What we do not speak becomes the quiet architect of our disconnection. Carlos didn't need revenge or retribution. He needed a voice. He needed to name the pain as the way to release it, right? That's why it's always good. We're talking about men and how they operate. They're not as vocal as we are, but when you find men that kind of have a group or they have a outlet, many times that outlet might be like a boys group that they have, that they go frequent, or there's some kind of outlet that they have, whether it's a group of men, some outlet, maybe it's some type of sports activity that they do, but you find that sometimes those are men that end up being happier because they're able to get out, even though it doesn't resolve the problem, at least they're able to get it out. At least they're able to bounce their ideas and what they're thinking off, and they're not holding it in, and it's not building with tension and calcifying, right? And men often have a hard time expressing. And it's not so much of the trauma that they're dealing with, it's the fact that they don't have a voice to release it. We're talking about how that stuff being held in, how it can actually fester and manifest into many other things. Sometimes it ends up being, just like a child, when they feel safe, when they get in the right environment, they will many times act out because they feel safe to do so. And you find that all of this stuff that's been pent up, now they're in a safe environment, they're doing it. They've needed to do it. They just didn't feel safe to do it until they got into the safe environment. Sometimes for men, it's like all of that being built up unconsciously, it pours out, right? It pours out unconsciously. Sometimes it turns into bad behavior because it's the unspoken words that are speaking through action. And they may not even realize that. Right? I'm not a psychologist, but sometimes that happens with men because they're less likely to express. The next part says emotional congestion is the residue buried underneath politeness and fear. The mind thrives on information. Excuse me. Something to think about. Something to dwell on. Processing information keeps the mind active. When you are on the healing path, the heart does not need or want more information. The heart wants to feel. The heart does not need to analyze, justify, or perform emotion. When stimulated by energy or experience, the heart needs to feel it and process it. This is the tender, often terrifying edge where spiritual hygiene begins its deeper work. Not in the mind, but in the sacred temple of the body and the heart. You may ask, if a feeling is attached to a story, what are we truly feeling? We are feeling the emotion itself, the grief, rage, shame, tenderness, and the residue of the meaning you gave to the story. You are feeling abandoned, not just because someone left, but because you told yourself it meant you were unworthy. You are feeling heartbroken, not just because the relationship ended, but because some aspect of you believed it confirms you are unlovable. To give yourself permission to feel is not simply releasing an emotion. It is also reclaiming authorship of your inner truth. Permission to feel is akin to saying, I will no longer deny myself the medicine of my own inner authority. That's beautiful. And that's what I'm feeling right now. That was my experience over this past week. I have felt so free. Like I've given myself permission to feel everything that arises, the excitement. I'm a very passionate woman and very expressive in every part of my being. There's so many different parts of me. I'm very multifaceted. You know, and I often have hidden those parts of myself because of certain traumas that I've experienced in my young age. And as I have grown to heal those parts and to accept, and to heal that, I've been more expressive and it feels good. It really does. I don't deny myself anything. And just because I express something doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to act on it, but I give myself permission to acknowledge that part of myself. And there's nothing that feels better. I'm telling you, the mind believes that when we suppress our feelings, we can avoid the pain. The assumption is inaccurate. It's not true. Permission is a spiritual agreement you make with yourself to be present with what is real, not being in denial of who you are and what's there, what you're feeling. It's an energetic yes to feeling, releasing, remembering, grieving, or resting, even when it is inconvenient, messy, or unfamiliar. It's exciting to me. Listen. It's a cleansing key that unlocks the gates of suppression and allows your soul to exhale. It's freeing. It's liberating. When you think about what you feel, you are feeling without permission. Your everyday tasks become habitual and your spiritual tasks become performative. You may pray, journal, or meditate and still carry tension in your body, grief in your center, and fear behind your smile. You may recite sacred words and still feel disconnected. You may seek clarity, but confusion will permeate the thinking mind because the truth is trapped behind a locked inner door. That door is called permission to feel. Permission to feel is not about falling apart. It is an agreement with yourself to allow what no longer belongs to fall away. When you grant yourself permission, the false self begins to crumble. The performance dissolves. The pretending dies. And what remains is the pulsing, naked truth. And it's so beautiful. It's shocking to people, but it's beautiful. You do not need to be strong. You owe it to yourself and everyone you care about to be real. In the sacred space of your permission to yourself, your soul returns to its center, cleansed, baptized, reborn in the waters of truth. Your emotional congestion is your responsibility to clear, not through force, not with logic, not because the intellect understands. You clear emotional congestion and spiritual smog by allowing. Let the tears come when they come. Let the truth be told, even if only in prayer. Let the body express what the ego was too afraid to name. This is how we unclog the heart. This is how the soul breathes again. I love this. This is giving me life, y'all. It's giving me life. And the beautiful thing about this, too, I'm going to add, is that when you get to that place where you feel like, and I hope everyone gets there. Sometimes I struggle too, because sometimes I go back and forth and I'm like, oh. And I remember you don't have to hide that part of yourself. The beautiful thing about that is when you allow yourself, first of all, to be honest with yourself about who you really are, it allows you to show up to be honest with others, first with self and then with everybody else. And when you do that, you release yourself. You release a part of yourself that is so powerful and so undeniable. And it's like, and the reason why it's so powerful and undeniable, because there's nothing left to hide. It's like, what is there left other than the authentic you? This is what it is. Listen, and it doesn't mean that everybody's going to like it. That's okay. And it doesn't mean that you've been called to everybody. You haven't, and that's okay. And not everybody has been called to you. But those who have been called to you, those who are aligned with your true self, right? They'll get you. They'll understand, and they will be drawn to you. Just imagine what happens when you are operating in a counterfeit and not your authentic true self. You're pulling people in and attracting people, but it's not your people. And you know why it's not your people? Because you're not being who you really are. You're not giving yourself permission to really be yourself, to really be your beautiful, unique self. There is no one in this world like you. There's a lot to be said about that. Nobody. There's people similar, but nobody like you, right? I love that saying, be yourself. Everybody else is taken. That's so true. Be yourself. And so when you allow yourself to really stand in your authenticity, those that remain, right? It's true. It's true to life. And this is how your soul breathes again. The next part says spiritual hygiene practice, meeting the voice of silencing. And then she says, name the voice. When you hear the voice that says, just let it go, place your hand over your heart or your belly and respond with, baby, I hear you, fear. This truth needs breath. Let the body speak. Let tears come. Let your body shake. Let your voice crack. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs that trauma is exiting the body. Rewrite the belief. Create a spiritual affirmation that reclaims your right to express. Honey, listen, and I told y'all many times, that's how this channel was birthed. It started out as Letty Speaks, and it's evolving. And I just felt spirit calling me to speak. Like, what you have to say is important. And so I didn't necessarily feel like I had a person per se to speak to, though I had lots to say. to many people. I didn't feel called to necessarily go to those people and say it, but I did feel called to speak publicly, out loud, not muzzle my mouth, for many different reasons. There's been just different situations where I have been silenced in many different ways. No, nobody put their hand over my mouth, but I gave my power away. I gave away my permission, right? And Spirit was like, it's time to take it back. And this is how we gonna do it. And I did it. And when I tell you, that's where my healing really began to cement. And what I found is that 9 times out of 10, it's not even so much to garner an audience, because people be so busy living their own life, right? Sometimes I'll garner a comment or a like. I don't, it's not about being a superstar or getting famous. It's not even so much of that, but it's giving voice to what needs to be said. It's giving voice to what has been held in for so long. And this is how I was called to do that. And it was so freeing, life changing. And I'm not necessarily considering myself a speaker, though I love words. And I've always been a word lover. I love to write. I've had this natural talent for language, writing, not necessarily speaking. That's something that I'm working on. But the language and the writing and the understanding, cognition around words, I've always had just a natural gift for that. And somehow that's where the enemy attacked me, right? And when I began to understand where my gifting lies, like, that's power. But you'll never know if you don't give yourself the opportunity. I would have never known if I didn't give myself permission to speak. That's what Spirit is saying. Give yourself permission to feel, like, what is coming up? What is rising up that you keep pushing down? Is there something? Maybe you don't even realize it. My pushing down was from trauma, but it's time to heal that. It will not hold us down any longer. And if no one else hears, it's spoken. The universe receives it. The divine receives it. My collective receives it. The ancestors who are always with me, and this cloud of witnesses around me constantly, they receive it, and they applaud, and they reward, right? They appreciate. Sometimes I'm speaking for them. And so, this has been life-changing for me. And that's the intention for you as well. So Spirit wants you to know, so does Ayanla, that you are safe. Your voice is safe. Your tears are holy, and your truth is allowed. You may speak. Okay? The voice of trauma that speaks louder than your sacred voice will always ask you to wait a little longer, to postpone it. Your soul will always invite you to unfold. Remind yourself that only you can grant the permission to feel. You have that power. Nobody can take that from you. And you're safe to speak. You are safe to heal and to feel. The next part says spiritual hygiene practice. Remove the gag. Okay. If this teaching speaks to your experience, you are invited to begin here. Write the words you weren't allowed to say. or you feel restricted from saying, I want you to write them. And when you feel complete, go ahead and burn that paper or bury it, or just read it aloud to your host of witnesses that are listening. Speak aloud to the voice of trauma and tell the voice, I know you tried to keep me safe when such and such happened. Go ahead and speak about what or who you needed to be saved from. Speak about as many things as you can remember. And then just politely just say, thank you. I no longer need to be silent to survive. You could also create a truth altar. Place your journal, a candle, and something that reminds you of your younger self in a safe place. And then sit in silence and stillness in that place. And then you're going to breathe deeply and call forth the words that you have swallowed. Give yourself permission to speak freely in this sacred space. Whatever comes up, I want you to speak it. And when it feels like you have nothing more to say, breathe deeply and then allow your body to move. Let your voice come back to life, whether it's in whispers, whether it's in sighs, if it needs to be a prayer or songs or some kind of movement. You can play your favorite song. You can dance if you need to. You can use a broom or a mop as your partner or your microphone. This is like the sacred antidote to the gag. Free yourself, basically. Free yourself. Do whatever you need to do to empower yourself and free yourself. This is a spiritual hygiene practice, releasing the voice of fear. For those who carry this silence, especially men, here is a beginning. Name that fear out loud. I am afraid to feel because I was never taught it was safe. That might be what you're feeling. You might be afraid to speak because you fear you'll lose control or some level of power, right? Those are really real feelings that you could be feeling. I want you to name them. Name them. And then as you think of a ritual of safe release, you can light a candle and place your hands on your chest and speak or cry the words that you've been holding back, fearful or afraid to speak. This is not about performance. It's all about just being present, being in your body and aware. And then reclaiming the inner voice, creating a new affirmation to counter that traumatic voice. My truth is safe with me. It may sound like that. Or I am not weak when I feel. I'm wise, right? For me, one of my healing methods was placing little stickies to remind me of what I needed to know to continue to move forward, to continue to heal, to continue to remind myself of who I was. And this is something that I did in one of my darkest moments, one of my most lowest moments in life, when I really needed healing. I put them stickies up all over my room. So every time I looked up, boop. Now, this time in my life, it happened to be scripture. Every time I looked up, I was reminded. Some of it was scripture, but some of it was just positive affirmations. Whatever you need to remind yourself, I want you to write it on stickies if you need to. So every time you look up, you're reminding yourself of who you are, of what you are capable of what you deserve, of what you want, of where you're going. Whatever you need to keep your mind on so that you can move forward to where you need to be, I want you to write those on those stickies. And then get in get in the habit of breathing through the breaking. Whenever you get to a moment where you feel like this emotional congestion has settled within you, I want you to let yourself moan and groan and sigh and exhale. You know how when you going through, you can't hardly breathe, but you can make yourself breathe, and it sounds like a pitiful breathe, a pitiful breath, but that's okay. I want you to give yourself permission to grieve, to moan, to groan, to sigh. As long as you exhale, let the voice come back to life, even in those painful moments. Emotional congestion doesn't need to be the end of your peace or your joy or your alertness. It's simply your soul knocking from the inside, asking you to set yourself free, right? And so this is not anything to be ashamed of or anything to hide from or deny that you're in. This is an opportunity, is what this is. It's an opportunity. And then the final blessing is, beloved, may you never again gag your truth to keep the peace. May your voice return like rain. May your heart unclog as spring. May your tears become sacred waters of cleansing. May the silence that once suffocated you now become the space where healing sings. Where healing sings, okay? Like a bird at your window that refuses to be quiet because it's trying to get your attention. May it sing like that. And that's chapter 7. Giving permission to feel. You were created for this. Yeah. Let's get back to our birthright. You were created to feel, to speak your truth, to allow your voice to be heard. And so thank you for stopping by. This was chapter 7. If you have not gotten the book, maybe this is your first time coming by and this caught your ear and this is something that you needed, we will come back next Sunday. We're here every Sunday, right here in my living room, doing the healing. And if we're not doing it, we're becoming aware of it so that we can have a way to do it. Okay. Spiritual Hygiene is what we're reading by Iyanla Vanzant. She is a New York Times bestseller, but even more than that, she is a minister of a different kind of gospel. She's a minister of the gospel of healing. She's multifaceted and she's able to draw from all different walks of life and experiences. I feel like she's able to reach and touch different people from different walks of life because she's lived it. She's been there. And she says the reason why spiritual hygiene works, because there are moments when silence becomes complicity. There are instances where your accommodation of dishonor, harm, or hurt become self-abandonment. There are patterns that you break only when you are brave enough to say, no, this ends here. I've been through that. I did that, got the t-shirt for it. We're not going back there again. For the purpose of spiritual hygiene, healing means remembering what was forgotten, restoring what was lost, and realigning what was distorted within the sanctuary of our own being. Yeah, of your own being. You're not responsible for another person's behavior. You are responsible for your own integrity. And you have the sacred responsibility to close the energetic loop within you. Okay? It starts with you. To activate the healing process, you must first awaken to the need for healing. This means recognizing that the mind, your inner throne of thought, beliefs, and perceptions have been occupied by unexamined narratives, inherited fear, internalized judgment, and reactive survival patterns. This is why spiritual hygiene works, because it helps us to address these things and to come to a realization of what's needed and how to get what's needed. Okay. And so this book is about $20, $30. You can go to Barnes and Nobles or order it online. It is available if you want to grab the book. Definitely worthy of putting on your bookshelf. It will be on mine. I feel like I'll be addressing this and pulling it off maybe often. But that's what we're doing today. We just got through reading chapter 7. We'll be doing chapter 8 next week. And chapter 8 that was chapter 7, cleansing the inner atmosphere, right? That's what we just got through talking about, cleansing the inner atmosphere. Remember last week we were talking about the cup, the inside of the cup, needing to be just as clean as the outside, right? The inside, it's not to shame or to cause anybody to feel any kind of way. It's just letting you know. We shower every day, don't we? We brush our teeth like clockwork. Some of us 3 times a day, and floss. We do skin routines, or we cleanse our skin. And we go and we do all these special cleansing rituals. So what about the inside? How are we cleansing and maintaining the inside of this beautiful sanctuary? That's what spiritual hygiene is about. Next week is chapter 8. It's talking about unbinding the bloodline, cleansing trauma patterns and ancestral residue. That was part of the smog, is having those ancestral patterns, carrying those, and that residue that's left behind that we're still dealing with. So we'll be talking about that next week. Now that we talked about cleansing the inner atmosphere. All right. And so it's just getting better and better. I'm enjoying it. I hope you are too. My name is Leticia, and the station, the channel that you're watching is Blood Moon Oracle. Okay. And I really do want you to go back to the end of this when we talked about ways to create ways to deal with situations when you feel like you've been muzzled, especially as men. Okay, if you're a man and you're watching this, hear me when I say this, because sometimes we operate in that I can't cry, I'm gonna be weak, I'm too, powerful for that. We operate in that because that's how we are taught, right? You better not cry, right? If he hits you, you better tear his butt up, right? We are taught a certain way, especially the boys. And so boys grow up to be men, right? But what if, two things can be true? What if there is also a need to allow yourself to cry sometimes so that it doesn't fester into something toxic and begin to affect those people that you love or those people that you want to love? What if there is a need to go in and allow yourself to feel? Right? So I want you to go and see if any of this is useful for you. My men, okay? This is for you. We have not forgotten about you, okay? This is for you too. And so that is the reading for the day. Thank you so much for stopping by. It's always a pleasure to read with you and for you. And I look forward to our next chapter next week. Unbinding the bloodline. And with that being said, thank you, Spirit, for joining us in this setting. Thank you for all of the rich reminders of these privileges that we have been born with. We don't have to work for them or earn them. We were born with them. We were born with a voice. We were born with the ability to feel and to enjoy life and to show up in our authentic selves. Who else are we going to be if we can't be ourselves? Right? That's a gift. That's a blessing. And so I'm going to end it there, and I look forward to our next setting. Next week is going to be a good one, so make sure you tune in, okay? All right. Till next time, my name's Leticia. Bye. Thank you, Ayanla.